Hello everyone, it's Crafty Glamper 77. Guess what today is? We're going to start the reading vlog of So This Is Love. I put a poll on my page a week and a half maybe ago, and this is what got the highest votes, so we're going to start with this. I'm really anxious to see how well it goes. I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I think I'm going to. I'm sitting here on the couch just to be comfortable because I don't know how long I'm going to be reading, where my stopping point's going to be. But also, this is not going to be a video of me. It's going to be more like an audio. If you know, you know. You popped in a cassette, put your earphones on, and you just kind of let your mind and imagination take you into the story without video or anything. That's just how we did it back then. And I still love that stuff today, just to listen to stories. So that's what we're going to do. That way, if you're driving or doing a project in your house, you don't have to worry about missing anything because there's not going to be a video. But yeah, I've got my pillows here, my blanket. I'm on the couch. I'm just ready to be comfortable for the long haul. I don't know how many vlogs it will take to get through it. I don't want to make it a bunch of vlogs, but we'll just see how it goes. This is trial and error. This is my first one. So your guys' constructive criticism, you can put on the comments if you think it was good, if you think I should try to change something to improve it. You're more than welcome to put that on there and just let me know. But please be nice, okay? This is my first time doing this. If I mess up on my words or have to go back and reread a sentence, I'm going to apologize now for it. I am only human. I make mistakes, and I'm sure I'm going to do it reading this book. But yeah, I just wanted to throw all that out there. Thank you so much for jumping on here. If you like it, please give me a thumbs up. If you want to subscribe and become part of my YouTube family, that is wonderful too. So yeah, if you're new, welcome, and if you're a return viewer, welcome back. I thank you guys so much for your love and support on my channel. I really, really do. So let's not listen to me ramble. Let's get started with this. I will be reading the inside sleeve just to kind of give you guys a reminder of what it's about, and then we're just going to dive right in there. So, okay, here goes nothing, guys. What if Cinderella never tried on the glass slipper? This is a book by Elizabeth Lim. The series is called A Twisted Tale, and the title of the book is So This Is Love. What if Cinderella never tried on the glass slipper? Cinderella's night at the ball is better than she imagined. She encounters wondrous, mysterious magic from another time. She escapes the tyranny of her stepmother, Lady Tremaine, for a few blissful hours, and she meets a charming stranger with whom she shares an instant connection. The next day, Cinderella learns that the Grand Duke is searching for a mysterious princess who left behind a glass slipper, and she dares to hope for a better future. That is, until Lady Tremaine intervenes. Unable to prove that she's the missing princess and unable to bear life under Lady Tremaine any longer, Cinderella attempts a fresh start, looking for work at the palace as a seamstress. But when the Grand Duke appoints her to serve under the king's visiting sister, Cinderella becomes witness to a grand conspiracy to take the king and the prince out of power, as well as a long-standing prejudice against fairies, including Cinderella's own fairy godmother. Faced with questions of love and loyalty to the kingdom, Cinderella must find a way to stop the villains of past and present before it's too late. Chapter 1. It was the event of the season, a royal ball in King George's palace that every eligible maiden had been invited to attend, and Cinderella couldn't believe she was going. One dance, she promised herself, watching the palace draw near from within her carriage. If I just have one dance, even if it's by myself, I'll be happy. I just want to remember what it's like to be free, to spin round and round under the moonlight. The palace was tremendous, a city within itself. Cinderella could have spent the entire evening simply exploring the courtyard where her carriage dropped her off. But she arrived hours late, so late that there was no one at the entrance to greet her. Even the halls inside were empty but for the dozens of unsmiling guards standing against the walls. She didn't have an invitation, so as she wandered up the grand staircase in search of the ballroom, she didn't dare ask a guard for directions, lest they ask her to leave. If not for the charming young man who found her searching for the king's party, she might have spent the entire night happily lost in the palace. "The ballroom is this way, miss," he said, gently tapping her hand. Flustered, she whirled to face him. She expected him to be one of the guards, but to her relief, he was a guest at the ball like herself. "Oh, so it is. Thank you." Her cheeks were already warm, flushed from climbing the endless staircase, but they seemed to grow hotter still. How foolish she must look. Why hadn't she simply followed the music? She could hear the strains of the orchestra not far and the low, dense murmuring of the king's guests. But the young man made no indication that he thought her a fool. Maybe he was simply being polite. That would explain his squared shoulders and stiff posture. Yet his eyes were warm and kind as he bowed to her. Something unfamiliar but wonderful fluttered in her stomach. "Thank you," she said again, instinctively curtsying. Would you like to dance?" Cinderella blinked. "Did you read my mind?" she asked with a soft laugh. "All I wish for tonight was a dance. It's been so long I've worried I've forgotten how." At that, the young man chuckled, and he seemed to relax, breaking the formality between them. A smile as warm as his eyes spread across his face, and he offered her his arm. "Then allow me to remind you." The next few minutes were a blur, a beautiful, rapturous blur. Yet Cinderella knew she'd never forget the waltz that stirred the hall, its lilting melody singing its way into her heart. Nor would she forget the way her companion looked at her, as if there were no one else in the ballroom. Every now and then he parted his lips as if he wanted to speak to her, but the music was so overwhelming he must have thought better of it. It was a miracle they hadn't collided with anyone else dancing, or were they the only ones on the floor? Cinderella hardly noticed. When the waltz ended, Cinderella braced herself to wake from the most beautiful dream. Murmurs of conversation replaced the orchestra's lush music, a potpourri of perfumes thickened the air, and the chandeliers seemed to glow dizzily bright. She half expected her dance partner to make an excuse to leave, but instead he leaned in to whisper, "Do you want to walk outside for a short while? I'd love to show you the gardens." Again, he read her mind. Or were they simply of one mind? Her father used to say that about himself and her mother, that from the moment they met, it had felt like they'd known each other forever. Or maybe I feel that way because it's been so long since I've made a friend, she thought as they left the palace. A cool breeze tickled her nape, and she inhaled, relishing the garden's freshness. "It's so peaceful," she said, brushing her fingers across the finely pruned hedges. "Would it be awful if I told you I preferred it out here to the ballroom?" "And why is that?" She hesitated, wondering what he'd think of the truth. "I think I'm more comfortable around the flowers and the trees. I haven't been around so many people in a long time," she admitted shyly. "I wouldn't even know what to say to most of them." "You didn't come to the ball to meet new people." "I came to the ball mostly to watch, to listen to the music and see the palace. But I have to say, it's even more beautiful out here than it is in there. It's certainly not as stuffy." They laughed together, and Cinderella felt that flutter in her stomach again. "I want to remember everything about tonight," she said. "The waltz, the flowers, the fountains, and me?" her companion teased. She smiled, but she was too shy to answer. Yes, she wanted to remember everything about him, the way he held her hand, gently yet firm, as if he never wanted to let go. The way his shoulders lifted when she smiled at him, the tenderness in his voice when he spoke to her. But she didn't even know his name. She should have asked when they first met, except her mind had been, and still was, in such a whirlwind. Besides, Now that they had danced together and escaped the ballroom to this beautiful garden, it felt like they had gone on a grand adventure together, and she didn't want to take a step back with pleasantries. And, if she was honest, she was also afraid he would ask where she was from. "What's on your mind?" he asked, sensing her thoughts had escaped the present. "Simply that I don't want tonight to end," she replied. He leaned closer, and Cinderella tilted her head, waiting for him to say something. But he closed his lips and cleared his throat, an odd flush coming over his cheeks. "I don't either," he hesitated. "I've been away from Valor's for years. Don't think I wanted to come home, but now I'm starting to change my mind." "Oh? Where were you?" He blinked, as if surprised she didn't know the answer, but he recovered quickly. "Away at school. It's not a very interesting story. Come, would you like to walk more?" She nodded. "I love it out here. Strange that there aren't more people in the gardens. Are we the only ones?" "Everyone's inside," he responded. "Dancing?" "That, or looking to meet the prince." "I see. Well, I'm glad to be out here. We used to keep a garden. Not as magnificent as this, of course, but oh!" Cinderella spied a path of rose bushes not far ahead. "You like roses? Who doesn't?" Cinderella knelt, careful that her skirts did not snag on the thorns. "My mother used to grow roses in her garden. We'd pick them together every morning." She fell silent, remembering how she carried on the tradition with her papa after her mother died. One by one they'd cut the flowers, each still so fresh that dew glistened on its petals and trickled down her trembling fingers. 8 pink roses, 7 white ones, and 3 sprigs of myrtle," she murmured, pointing at the pink and white roses in the line of bushes. "What is that?" "It's what I would always bring Mama. The same arrangement my father presented to her when he'd asked her to marry him." The story of their courtship had been her favorite. One Papa had told her over and over. She never tired of it, never stopped asking him to tell it to her. Before her mother died, he'd always ended the story with a smile, saying, "Your mother is my true love." Once she was gone, his expression became solemn, shadows sinking into the lines of his brow, his teeth clenched tight to keep from grimacing. Then he would say, "Your mother was my true love." So Cinderella had learned how one word could change everything, and she had stopped asking her father for the story. "I'd nearly forgotten about it," she said softly, a strain in her voice. "It's been so long." 8 pink roses, 7 white ones, and 3 sprigs of myrtle," he repeated. "I'll help you remember." She looked up at him, a rush of warmth flooding her heart. How could it be that someone she'd known for only a handful of hours could already feel so dear to her? By the time they had strolled across the gardens, past the marble pavilions and sparkling ponds, taken a rest by the stairs, she completely lost track of time. "There's a part of the garden you haven't seen that I know you will make you smile. It's a little far. Are you tired?" "No, not at all." He started to lead her toward it, but as she followed, Cinderella glanced behind her. "Wait, I want to take a moment to admire how beautiful this is." He tilted his head. "What is there to admire?" "Everything. The towers, the trees, the scraps of curtain peeking out from the windows, even the clouds." Cinderella clasped her hands to her chest and turned toward Valor's, watching the city sparkling below. "And if we look this way, what a view!" "I'd never appreciated it much. I see the palace every day from my window, but seeing it from this angle is another story entirely," Cinderella said. She leaned against the railing, admiring the glittering white palace and the gardens skimming beneath it. "I don't know the next time I'll be back." Then she sat on one of the steps, moving the folds of her gown to hug her knees close. "I used to dream about coming here. Strange to think I don't have to do that anymore." He knelt beside her, taking the lower step. "What other dreams do you have?" Cinderella paused. Before coming to the ball, she had so many dreams, but they'd simply been that, dreams. Wishes, really, if she wanted to be honest about it. Wishes about living a different life. She hadn't even dared leave home, not until tonight. But she couldn't tell him that. "I'd like to see more of the world," she said slowly, "and I want to help people." She stopped. She hadn't given it much more thought than that. She didn't even know what it meant to help people. Besides, how could she, when she was trapped in her stepmother's house? Anything else? Cinderella pursed her lips. After the ball, she might never get a chance to discuss such things with someone again. She'd go back to working for Lady Tremaine and her stepsisters, to being forgotten. I'd like to remember what it's like to be loved, she finally confessed, staring at her hands. As soon as she said it, she wished she could take it back. It sounded miserable, even to her ears, but she couldn't remember the last time anyone had said anything kind to her, let alone held her hand and spent time getting to know her. To have to go back to mistreatment and neglect, it was the last thing Cinderella wanted to think about. She wished this night could last forever. You must think I'm hopeless, she said quickly, before her companion could respond. No, not at all. She didn't dare look up at him, but he shifted closer to her so their fingertips nearly touched. I can understand. Sometimes I wish that for myself, too. He drew a deep breath. My mother used to tell me that there are many kinds of love. Unconditional love, self-love, love for your family, love for your friends, romantic love. He paused, seeming to search for the right words. That's all are important in fulfilling the heart. You say you haven't been around people in a long time? For me, it's the opposite. I'm surrounded by people, but few see past Your heart? Cinderella asked. His mouth bent into an unreadable smile. Yes, my heart, he said softly. Then he kissed her. She'd never been kissed before, never been in love. Yet when his lips touched hers, something inside her bloomed, coming alive for the first time in years. In that moment, all her worries and troubles grew wings, leaving her with a rush of joy she hadn't felt in a long time. Out of nowhere, a clock chimed, and her fairy godmother's warning came rushing into her memory. At the stroke of 12, the spell will be broken, and everything will be as it was before. Cinderella jolted, ending the kiss. Oh my goodness, what's the matter? It's midnight. Yes, so it is. When she started to rise, he caught her hand. But why? Cinderella faltered. 100 explanations spun in her head, but the only thing she could say was, goodbye. No, wait. You can't go now. It's only... Oh, I must, Cinderella disentangled herself from his arms. Please, I must. But why? The clock chimed again, overpowering her sense. What could she say? Well, Oh, the prince. I haven't met the prince. The prince? His brows drew together. Goodbye. She ran as fast as she could through the gardens and the ballroom, stopping only briefly to wave goodbye to the guards waiting in the halls. Everyone seemed to want her to stay longer, but Cinderella ignored their cries. Even when she left her glass slipper on the staircase, she thought better of retrieving it. There was no time. Once she was in the carriage, it sped out of the palace, spiraling down the hill into Valours. It was the longest minute of her life. Little by little, her sparkling ball gown sparkled no more, and when the clock finished blaring midnight, she was back in her rags, sitting on a pumpkin, surrounded by Bruno, her dog, and Major, her horse. She lurched, spying on oncoming coach speeding their way. As she bolted off the road, it trundled past, smashing her pumpkin under its horse's hooves. Once it was out of sight, she caught her breath and knelt to pick up the mice that had served as her elegant horses. Her head swam, reliving the last few moments at the ball. She wished she could have stayed longer with that handsome stranger she'd met. Oh, what a silly excuse she'd made to him. What did she care about meeting the prince? She shook her head, simmering with embarrassment. For better or worse, she didn't think she would ever see him again. Despite all that, what a wonderful time she'd had. To finally see the palace with its glistening chandeliers and all the beautiful gowns and the gardens. To drink in the ball's romantic music. In the shadows, a glass slipper shimmered on her foot. She bent to pick it up. Strange that everything should have disappeared except her glass slipper. She hugged it to her chest. Before this night, she hadn't thought magic would ever touch her life. None of this would have been possible without her fairy godmother. She gazed at the stars twinkling above her. Somehow she knew her godmother was listening. "Thank you so much for everything." Carefully, she tucked her glass slipper into her pocket. At least she would have it to remind her of what a beautiful night it had been. Her fairy godmother's spell had been broken. Tomorrow, everything would go back to the way it was before. Her stepmother would go back to her ordering her around the chateau, her stepsisters Anastasia and Drusilla to tormenting her over every one of their needs. But she caught a glimpse of happiness, something she hadn't felt in many years. Her eyes had opened to the possibility of leaving home, of dreaming dreams that might actually come true. But she wasn't brave enough to chase them, not yet. Not so soon, anyway, after such a magnificent night. What she didn't realize was she might not have a choice. Chapter 2. Threads of dawn embossed the sky, rays of pinkish light stretching over the opalescent clouds to brighten the city beneath it. Many of the young ladies who had traveled from afar to attend the ball were only now arriving home, their feet swollen from dancing all night and their spirits deflated from failing to catch even a single glance from Prince Charles. For Cinderella, the morning was like any other, though she woke in better spirits than usual, and she hummed to herself while she prepared breakfast for her stepmother and stepsisters. Anastasia and Drusilla weren't awake yet, at least not when she ascended the staircase to deliver their meals. But once she reached the top, she heard her stepmother barging into her daughter's room, urging them to get dressed. "Everyone's talking about it," Lady Tremaine said, while Cinderella brought a breakfast tray into Anastasia's room, where everyone had gathered. "The whole kingdom. Hurry now, he'll be here any minute." "Who will?" asked Drusilla. "The Grand Duke. He's been hunting all night." "Hunting," her stepsister repeated. "For that girl, the one who lost her slipper at the ball last night. They say he's madly in love with her." Anastasia yawned. "The Duke is?" No, the Prince." Cinderella gasped and dropped the trays. The Prince? She couldn't believe it. The last thing she would have guessed was that the young man she spent the evening with was Prince Charles himself. Then again, she never expected to see him again, much less learn the next day that the heir to the throne of Arules was looking for her. "Pick that up, you clumsy fool." Obediently, Cinderella knelt, but her attention was far from the shards of broken porcelain on the floor. She clung to her stepmother's every next word. "The glass slipper is their only clue," Lady Tremaine continued. "The Duke has been ordered to try it on every girl in the kingdom, and if one can be found whom the slippers fit, then, by the king's command, that girl shall be the prince's bride." His bride? The word made Cinderella's head reel. Everything blurred, and she forgot her stepmother and her stepsisters even where she was. If the prince wanted her to be his bride, that meant he loved her. It meant she'd no longer have to work as her stepmother's servant or live in the attic alone. She'd be free. Without thinking, she began humming the song she and her companion, the prince, had danced to. An imaginary orchestra accompanied her, strings swelling with a lush harmony, a harp tinkling a luxurious sweep at the cadence, and flutes singing the dulcet counter melody. She swayed with every step as she made her way back to her room to make herself presentable for the Duke's arrival. It just would not do to see the Grand Duke with dust in her hair and crumbs all over her apron. She was numb with anticipation. How long had it been since she'd allowed herself to feel such hope? Cinderella reached for the comb beside her mirror and ran it through her hair, a thrilling tingle shooting up her spine with each stroke. From the window, she could see the king's castle gleaming in the distance, its towers and spires glittering white as pearls. Graceful as a swan, it sat on a cloud of green. a glorious garden with endless rows of elm and spruce trees so verdant that emeralds were dull in comparison. Was the prince inside now, looking out from one of those tall arched windows and wondering where she was? Would he really marry her once he found out she possessed the other glass slipper? She didn't know what would happen when they were united, but that didn't matter. In fact, it thrilled her. For once the future would bring more than her quotidian chores. Her stepmother's rebukes, her stepsister's spite. Her life was going to change, finally. Leaning closer to the mirror, she studied herself, wishing she had something nicer than her work dress to wear. Setting down her comb, she glanced out the window, reflected on her mirror. No sign of the Grand Duke yet. How she hoped he would arrive soon. She didn't know how much longer she could wait. She hugged herself, feeling her anticipation building inside. So deep in a gaze was she that she didn't realize Lady Tremaine had followed her up the winding stairway to her tiny garret room in the attic, not until it was too late. No, she whispered, finally seeing her stepmother appear behind her, her dark silhouette filling the mirror. Her horror grew as Lady Tremaine's fingers slid across the wooden door. Cinderella turned, but her stepmother seized the key and slammed the door shut. No! Cinderella raced across the room and pounded her fist against the door. You can't keep me in here. Please, you can't. You just can't. But Lady Tremaine's footsteps were already fading, quickly descending from the tower. Cinderella crumpled against the door. It was no use. Her stepmother wasn't coming back. She was trapped. Below, the gates outside creaked open. Horses nickered and the heavy wheels of a carriage trundled onto the driveway. The Grand Duke had arrived. A burst of hope swelled in her chest. Picking herself up, she rushed to the window, frantically trying to get the Duke's attention. Your Grace, she shouted, waving. Over here! Please help me! Below, the footman helped the Grand Duke out of the carriage. He cast an odd shadow, thin, but for the paunch at his belly, with an egg-shaped head. A tall blue hat capped his black hair, its bright red feather matching the sash around his torso. As Lady Tremaine greeted him outside, he walked briskly to the door, given what seemed like only the most obligatory of greetings. Your Grace, Cinderella tried again, louder this time, but the Duke disappeared into the house. He hadn't heard her. No one had, and no one would. After all, she was locked up in the chateau's tower, so high she was peering down at the top of the trees. It was no use shouting. Anger bubbled at the back of Cinderella's throat, but she pushed it away. She never used to question her stepmother's cruelty. Over the years, she toughened her heart, forgiving Lady Tremaine and her daughters every night for the unkindness they seemed to enjoy meting out to her. But today, her stepmother had taken a dream Cinderella had only just begun to have faith might actually come true, and shattered it. And Cinderella was more trapped than ever. Mice scurried out of their hiding places inside the walls and nibbled at the hem of her skirts. Another day, seeing them might have made her smile, but blinking back tears, Cinderella turned away from them. I just want to be alone, she told them softly. Not understanding, the mice circled her, their little paws tapping against the wooden floor. For so long, the mice had been her only company, besides Bruno. They were certainly preferable to the company of her stepsisters. Until the previous night, she hadn't spoken with anyone outside her father's house in weeks, likely even months. An ache stirred in her heart as she remembered her easy conversation with Charles the Prince. If only she'd known. What would it have changed? I would have still run off at midnight, wouldn't I? Unsure of the answer, she sighed and watched the mice finally scurry off, disappearing back into the wall. She wished she could escape her room as easily, but no one was coming to save her, least of all the mice. She inhaled a ragged breath and steadied herself. She used to spend hours every night wondering what she'd done to make her stepmother hate her so much. Her attempts to swallow her pride and obey Lady Tremaine so she might feel some affection for her seemed to only infuriate her stepmother more. As Cinderella grew older, she gave up and simply focused on making each day as bearable as possible. Time crawled forward. Cinderella didn't know how long she sat there, drying her tears and trying to convince herself that everything would turn out all right. After what seemed a very long time, the gates outside closed once more. She rose and went to the window, leaning against the wooden sill as she watched the Grand Duke's carriage curve out of her father's manor and disappear beyond the oak trees lining the road. Her stepmother did not see the Duke out, which could only mean that neither Anastasia nor Drusilla had fit into the glass slipper. No surprise there, yet Cinderella felt no satisfaction, only relief. Maybe now everything will go back to the way it was. She pursed her lips, only a fool would believe that was true. Things couldn't go back to the way they were. Besides, now that she tasted the possibility of a new life, for the first time since her father's death, could she fathom returning to being her stepmother and stepsister's servant? Stifling a sigh, she bunched up the folds of her apron in her fist, squeezing tight. Not everything is lost, she reasoned. I still have the other glass slipper. But what good would that do her? Storm clouds brewed in the distance, a bitter breeze gusting into her room. Cinderella shut the window, but her hand lingered on the pane. Her father's chateau had been her home ever since she was born. It had been beautiful once. Towering oak trees had surrounded the estate, ivy growing over the gray painted bricks. Cinderella's favorite part had been the garden, where she'd spent countless hours with her mother on a swing richly covered with flowers. The swing was no more, long since taken down. Aside from her memories, this place was all she had left of her mother and father. Lady Tremaine had sold most of her parents' belongings years ago. Their portraits and paintings, their books, their furniture, their clothes, and their letters she had burned. For so long, Cinderella had ignored the tug in her heart to leave. How could she go when this place was all she knew, when it was all she had left of her loving parents? How did she know that life out there would be any better than the one she suffered here? Not to mention the fact that she had nowhere to go, no plan for how to support herself. There weren't a lot of options for a penniless orphan. Besides, Lady Tremaine and her daughters were the only family she had left. So whatever bitterness she felt toward them for making her a servant in her own home, she swallowed. Papa would have wanted me to help take care of them, she would tell herself. But for the first time, she was beginning to question whether that was true. For the first time, she saw that Lady Tremaine would never want what was best for her, that any time Cinderella came close to feeling a spark of happiness, she would try to smother it. As though she summoned her, Cinderella heard her stepmother's footsteps again, steadily ascending the tower stairwell. Except this time, Lady Tremaine would not visit alone. Can you believe the nerve of that man? Anastasia huffed. That was clearly my slipper. My slipper! Your slipper, said Drusilla. That's rich. Their mother rebuked them. Girls, some dignity. Cinderella's stepsisters quieted, but not for long. Anastasia was the first to complain again. Slightly breathless, she said, Why do we have to go all the way up here? It's so dusty. I thought I heard a mouse, Drusilla added. Mother, can't we just have her come down? Why are we going to her? That's so... Quiet, you two, Lady Tremaine said sharply. Enough complaining. Cinderella steeled herself. From the sound of it, her stepmother was not in a good mood. But Cinderella wasn't afraid. What more could she do to her? The Grand Duke had already left, and he wasn't coming back. He was off to find another girl who'd fit the glass slipper and who would marry the prince. A girl who wasn't her. The footsteps were getting closer. It's time you saw her true colors, Lady Tremaine said. She expressly disobeyed my orders and stole her way to the ball. Cinderella froze. How did her stepmother know she'd gone to the ball? She'd gotten home well before they had, and in the morning everything had seemed normal enough, at least until she heard the news and the song she'd been humming. It was from the waltz at the ball. A chill twisted down Cinderella's spine. Could her stepmother have heard her? If so, Lady Tremaine would know that Cinderella was the girl with the glass slipper, the girl the prince was searching for. Following her up to her room and locking her in the attic without any explanation, suddenly it made sense. But the Grand Duke had gone, so what would happen to her now? I will not apologize, Cinderella told herself staunchly, not for going to the ball. As the key clicked into the lock and the doorknob began to turn, Cinderella took a deep breath, gathering her nerves and fearing that she was just as trapped as ever. Chapter 3. What a debacle. Debacle? Ferdinand the Grand Duke of Malloy leaned back against the carriage's plush velvet cushion, wishing he were anywhere but there. Unfortunately, according to the rolled-up list by his side, its pages slightly crumpled at the bottom corners. He still had nearly 100 households to visit. He closed his eyes, knowing that the moment he fell asleep, they would arrive at the next house on the list. All he could hope was the next family wouldn't be as dreadful as the last. Simply recalling Lady Tremaine's awful daughters made him shudder. It's been shameful how the two young women had thrown themselves at the glass slipper. "Why, it's my slipper," they had cried at each other. "It's my glass slipper." If Ferdinand heard those 4 words again today, he would go mad. Indeed, it would surprise him if tomorrow he woke to find all his black hairs had gone gray. The indignity of it all! Sunlight streamed in through the folds of the carriage's curtains, the bright light making the Duke wince. He opened an eye, stealing a glimpse outside. They were about to pass the statue of his father in one of the city finer squares. It was his favorite part of the velours, and as a boy, Ferdinand could never get enough of boasting to his friends about how important his father was, to have such a dignified and heroic likeness in the center of the city. "One day I, too, will have a statue," he declared. So imagine his horror to see pigeons perched on his father's head, the stone facade of which clearly hadn't been scrubbed clean in weeks, and dogs were relieving themselves among the flower beds surrounding the statue. If he hadn't been on such a tight schedule, he would have barged out of his carriage, shooed away the pigeons, and demanded that utterly disrespectful commoners take their canine brutes somewhere elsewhere. "Disgraceful," muttered the Duke with a scowl. "And after all his family had done for Arulas." To have the filth-ridden state of his father's statue addressed as soon as possible. How times had changed. When he was a child, people had respect for nobility. The sheer idea of the prince marrying a lesser noble would have sent tongues wagging. What's more, a commoner of undistinguished background would have been unheard of. His father, the previous Grand Duke, certainly would have advised the king against it, as Ferdinand had tried. His father had overseen the rebuilding of Arulas after the 17 Years' Wars. This magnificent statue in Valour's main square now honored him for facilitating the exile of all magical beings, namely fairies, who'd held far too much sway in politics, with that ridiculous tradition of blessing and cursing princes and princesses from the kingdom. Ferdinand was not going to get any statue for finding Prince Charles's so-called true love. What had he done to deserve such a fate? To be volleyed around the kingdom like some common messenger boy. He spent all night and all morning reciting a silly proclamation about a glass slipper instead of working on critical laws and budget plans to share with the council. Yes, Arulas had been at peace for over half a century, but there were important treaties still to be negotiated, great minds to meet. Why, just the other day, Ferdinand had read about an inventor who traveled the world on a flying balloon, and he could even take passengers in it. Other nations were chartering ships to circumnavigate the world, establishing important trade routes and discovering new lands. But here he was, the right-hand man to the king of Arulas, dispatched to each corner of the realm to find the owner of a shoe. Ferdinand stared at the glass slipper sitting on his lap, hating the very sight of it. He had half a mind to throw it out the window. He blamed the prince. "You frightened her," Prince Charles had accused him late the night before. "If you hadn't sent your men after her, she might have come back." The youth was delusional, and it had taken all of Ferdinand's restraint to bite his tongue and not tell him exactly that. The king hadn't been much help. It had been his idea to have every maiden in the kingdom try the slipper, an idea Ferdinand had agreed to. In fact, Ferdinand had happily penned the proclamation, "It is upon this day decreed that a quest be instituted throughout the length and breadth of our domain. The sole and express purpose of such a quest is to be as follows: that every maid throughout the kingdom, without prearranged exception, shall try on her foot this slipper of glass, and should one be found upon whose foot the slipper shall properly fit, such maiden shall be acclaimed the object of the search, and immediately forthwith shall be looked upon as the true love of His Royal Highness, our beloved son and heir, the noble prince." Only Ferdinand hadn't expected that he would have to be the one doing the questioning. King George had always been irrational when it came to matters regarding his son. It reminded Ferdinand why he was glad he never married or begotten any children. There were more elegant ways to leave a legacy. He only prayed he'd find the maiden soon, very soon. Endeavoring to keep from falling asleep, he reached into his pocket for a handkerchief, to clean his monocle. But before he had a chance to use it, the driver reined the horses to a halt. "We've arrived, Your Grace." Ferdinand grimaced. Reaching for his hat, he put on his most dignified expression, departed the carriage, and strode toward the front door. Inside the house, someone peeked through the curtains, hastily closing them when the Grand Duke noticed. "It's him," he heard a young woman squeal. "The Grand Duke. With my—" The Duke pulled his hat over his ears before he heard the dreaded words. "Glass slipper." It was going to be an excruciating long day. Chapter 4. The door creaked open with a soft groan, and Cinderella braced herself for her stepmother's arrival. "I'm leaving," she practiced announcing to Lady Tremaine in her head. "I won't stay here another minute." Only, where would she go? Where could she go? Dressed in these rags, no one would believe she'd been the girl at the ball with the dazzling gown and glass slippers. I'll find the Grand Duke and show them I have the other slipper." She inhaled, bolstered by the plan. "He'll have to believe me then." Her stepmother's shadow spilled through the doorway, snuffing the scant sunlight illuminating Cinderella's room. Behind her, barricading the exit, stood her stepsisters. Cinderella couldn't remember the last time Anastasia and Drusilla had come to the attic. From their wrinkled noses and contemptuous gazes, they must have been wondering the same. "I forgot how small this place is," Drusilla grumbled. "We can barely fit in here." "It's dirty, too," added Anastasia. "All this dust is getting in my hair." She tossed a red ringlet over her shoulder and fanned herself with her hands. Seeing Lady Tremaine's curled lip, her stepsister's raised chins and turned cheeks, Cinderella straightened. However they mocked her now, she wouldn't let them hurt her. "The Grand Duke has left," said Lady Tremaine evenly. "He shan't be returning." "I know," replied Cinderella. "Good. It has come to my attention that you have not been entirely truthful with us." Cutting off Cinderella's protest, her mother went on. "I have given the matter some thought, and I have a mind to report you." "Report me?" Cinderella frowned. This wasn't what she expected at all. "What have I done?" "What have you done?" repeated Lady Tremaine. She turned to her daughters, laughing. "She pretends she hasn't the faintest idea." Anastasia and Drusilla didn't seem to have any idea either, but they nervously tittered along. "You couldn't have possibly managed to go to the ball in that." "Whom did you steal from?" "What?" Cinderella blustered and stunned. She bit her lip, trying to calm herself, but her voice shook. I don't understand." "Don't you?" Lady Tremaine sniffed. "The gown, the earrings, the carriage, the glass slippers?" Drusilla was the first to react. "Her? It couldn't have been her." "Mother," chimed in Anastasia with crossed arms, "she's the girl with the glass slipper? You can't be serious." Indeed, Lady Tremaine's icy gaze did not leave Cinderella. "It seems we've all underestimated her, but she has made a grave error." She raised a commanding hand to her daughters. "Search the room." "No!" Cinderella lurched to stop her sisters, but they were too fast. Drusilla pushed her away, nearly throwing her against the wall. In a wild frenzy, the two tore apart Cinderella's bed, pulling off the sheets and grabbing the scissors on her dresser to slash through the mattress. Despite her determination to stay calm, Cinderella panicked. The scene was an echo of the prior night when her stepsisters had ripped apart her dress, her mother's dress that she had remade, broken her green bead necklace, and cruelly tormented her until she had burst into tears. Every time she thought she was strong enough to endure their malice, they found new ways of hurting her. She couldn't let them find the glass slipper. It was all she possessed of her time at the ball, the only reminder of a rare treasured moment of happiness, the only thing that could actually stop her obtain a new life. "Stop, please," cried Cinderella, trying to pry the scissors from Anastasia's hands. "Mother!" Anastasia yelled. Cold fingers encircled Cinderella's wrist, sharp nails digging into her skin. As her stepmother dragged her back, Cinderella's eyes widened with alarm. Drusilla had found the missing glass slipper. "You were right," she shrieked. "Mother, this is—" Lady Tremaine extended her hand. "Give it here." Before Drusilla could obey, Cinderella twisted out of her stepmother's grip and scooped up the slipper. Her stepmother's face darkened. "Cinderella, give me the slipper." "No." "At once, Cinderella." Cinderella didn't budge. The royal proclamation had stated that the prince would marry the girl who fit the glass slipper he had found at the ball. If she gave hers to Lady Tremaine, Anastasia and Drusilla would claim it, bring it to the palace, and lie to the king that they had danced with the prince. Even if he didn't recognize the women, which surely he wouldn't, it would be a powerful bargaining tool. Firmly she repeated, "No." "Very well, then," said her stepmother, strangely calm. "Drusilla, Anastasia." Coming from both sides of the room, the sisters lunged for her, and Cinderella's mind reeled with panic. She couldn't let them have the glass slipper. As they tore at her, shouting, "Give it here!" Cinderella suddenly knew what she had to do. Mustering as much strength as she could, she raised the glass slipper high above her head, watching the iridescent glass catch the light outside and sparkle like diamonds. Then she flung it at the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. Drusilla shouted, "Look what you've done!" Breathing hard, Cinderella barely heard her stepsister. The sight of her shattered slipper stung, and a sharp ache rose to her chest. The shoe had been her key to finding the young man from the ball again, to making a new life for her outside Lady Tremaine's domain. Now that it was no more, Cinderella gritted her teeth. Now that it was no more, her stepmother couldn't use it to her advantage. "Mother," Anastasia cried, "how could she? I don't understand how she got the glass slipper in the first place." "Silence," Lady Tremaine cut in. Then her voice became lethally soft. "Girls, step outside, please." "But, Mother—" "I will not repeat myself." In a huff, Drusilla and Anastasia paraded out of the room and shut the door. Once they were gone, Lady Tremaine stepped over the pile of glass shards and regarded Cinderella with an icy gaze. "So, you lied to me." "Stepmother, you can't possibly think that I stole—" "I don't care where you got the dress or the shoes," Lady Tremaine interrupted, "or how you managed to go to the ball." Her pale green eyes narrowed. "You have overstepped your place for the last time. Look at yourself. You are nothing. An orphan and a servant. Who would want you? Certainly not His Royal Highness." The words cut deep, and Cinderella struggled to keep her tone steady. I'm my father's daughter." "Your stepdaughter. I'm a member of this family." Her stepmother gave a hollow laugh. "A member of this family? Your imagination is to be commended if you truly believe that." Cinderella's lip quivered. "Why do you hate me so much?" "Hate you?" Disbelief, then amusement glittered in Lady Tremaine's eyes. "What makes you think you're worthy of my consideration, let alone hatred? But have I ever beaten you, Cinderella, or starved you, or publicly shamed you? That's what they do to girls at the orphanage." Mutely, Cinderella shook her head. "I locked you here because you were deceitful. You lied to me and my daughters." "I never lied," Cinderella argued, gathering her courage. "At every turn, I've done what you have asked. I've cleaned, I've cooked, I've never complained. All I wanted was for you to think of me as one of your daughters." "How could I think of you as a daughter of mine?" Lady Tremaine barked. Calming herself, she went on. "Until the day I met you, you've never done a day's work. Do you remember what you said to your father? Papa, you brought me a mother. Her stepmother scowled, as if I were a thing to be brought, an object to be shopped for. Cinderella did remember. In her joy at seeing Lady Tremaine, the words had gushed out of her mouth. She hadn't meant them as an insult. I was happy to meet you. I didn't mean... I remember how you looked down on my daughters. You, with your fine dresses and music lessons. Your riding clothes and flowers and little songs for the birds and that dog, Lady Tremaine scoffed. The first thing you did was mock me and embarrass my daughters in front of your father. I didn't. Of course you didn't know. You presume ignorance is innocence. I've had to build my life from nothing, give my daughters a place in this society. But you scoffed at your old clothes and Drusilla's teeth and Anastasia's hair. At the accusation, Cinderella's brow furrowed. Had she? She could remember the day her stepmother had arrived so clearly. They'd came during her music lesson, and she raced out of it as soon as she seen her father's carriage outside the window, trundling toward home. No one had told her about Lady Tremaine, so it had jolted Cinderella to see her. The heart-shaped hair piled high, making her seem even taller than her father, her long neck and unforgiving posture. She'd been wearing a wine-colored dress with a high collar, one daughter on either side, both with evenly curled ringlets, neither smiling. She's a lady, one of the servants had said, passing Cinderella, who hid by the stairs. Best not run to your papa and hug him as you always do. Keep your chin up and curtsy when you greet his guest. That she done. But maybe she'd held her chin too high or curtsied too low. Her papa had never required her to be on such stiff behavior before, and she so wanted to impress her new mother. She had been so nervous. Lady Tremaine, Cinderella had said in greeting with her deepest curtsy. Papa chuckled, gently pulling her up. No need for that, Cinderella. We're family now. Oh, Papa, she exclaimed, hugging him fiercely. You've brought me a mother. In her excitement, her hair bow came undone, and her father retied it for her. Why don't you show Drusilla and Anastasia the music room while Lady Tremaine and I settle into the chateau? I have a music lesson this afternoon, she said to her new sisters, careful to be polite and considerate. She so wanted Anastasia and Drusilla to like her. My teacher wants me to learn a new song. She's upstairs waiting now. Would you like to join me? I want to sing, Drusilla had said. Anastasia plays the flute. How could she have known that her stepdaughters had no talent for music? She hadn't meant to embarrass them. Later, Cinderella had caught the servants chatting more in the kitchen. They hadn't seen her, and she hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but she had never forgotten their conversation. I don't like the looks of our new mistress. You see the way she eyes the finances? Just now she was telling me I've been feeding the chickens too much, and that I've a heavy hand with the butter. I fear she married the good master for his money. Hush, you'll get yourself in trouble talking like that. Her husband was a lord. Yes, but a penniless one. That can't be true. The master wouldn't. The master's been fooled, I swear. I heard that the Lord Tremaine squandered his family's fortune gambling. When he was called to serve in the war, he joined only to escape his creditors. Then he tried to desert and was hanged. It was a disgrace. You can't believe those sorts of rumors. They're not rumors. You know what a kind heart the master has. He probably met her during his travels and took pity on her and her daughters. But she isn't innocent. If only you could hear half the things people say about her. Delusions of grandeur, for one. And now that she's mistress of the house, who I truly worry about as dear Sin. The servants had seen her then and hadn't said any more. At that time, Cinderella hadn't understood the importance of what she'd overheard, even after her father had passed away, leaving Lady Tremaine as head of the household. She hadn't given her stepmother's past much thought. Whenever her stepmother was cruel to her, she told herself she was better off staying here, in her father's home with her stepfamily, than venturing outside. But what if she'd been wrong? Her stepmother was calculating, and she would not stop at nothing to ensure her future as well as her daughters. She was also ruthless. Cinderella just hadn't let herself acknowledge how ruthless. She'd shielded herself by burying her unhappiness in daydreams and pretending that she was fine, that they needed her. She looked up at Lady Tremaine, a woman who'd once had everything that mattered to her: wealth, status, and the admiration of her peers. Now she lived in a dated chateau with no servants except her daughters, and so little money that she'd had to sell the draperies to pay for their gowns. "You misunderstood me, stepmother," said Cinderella quietly. "I wish we could have settled this years ago, if this is what was bothering you." "I didn't look down on Anastasia or Drusilla. I was only wishing I had a mother like they did. Mine died." "I heard enough about your dead mother from your dead father," Lady Tremaine snapped. "When he passed, I took it upon myself to reform you. I've done my best trying to raise you into a respectable girl, but I can see my efforts have been in vain." She kicked the glass shards towards Cinderella. "Clean this mess. I'll decide what to do with you later." Her stepmother turned on her bed, on her heel, and before Cinderella could lurch for the door, it slammed shut again, the key turning in the lock to keep her from leaving. Outside, her stepsister's voices echoed up the stairwell. "What are you going to do, Mother?" Anastasia asked. "She can't stay here. What if the Grand Duke comes back and—" "I am aware, Anastasia. Well, we can't keep her locked up in there forever." Lady Tremaine's tone rose a notch, as if she wanted Cinderella to hear. "I am going to send her away." "Send her away?" Drusilla repeated. "Mother, have you thought this through? If you do that, who's going to press our clothes? Who'll cook breakfast and bring us tea and—" Drusilla suddenly went quiet, a sign that Lady Tremaine had cast her deadly look. During the heavy silence that followed, Cinderella inched towards the door, pressing her ear against the wood. Her heart roared in her ears, but she needed to hear what her stepmother was going to say. "There's a man from the far seas who makes his trade in troublesome girls." A deliberate pause. "It is to our good fortune that he happens to be in town again tonight." "So, you're going to sell her?" "I will certainly consider it. I have considered it before. The price he's willing to pay will be enough for us to hire a new maid." Cinderella held her breath, panic rioting within her. She pressed her ear against the door to catch more, but all she could hear were Anastasia's and Drusilla's laughs and echoing up into the tower. It was too cruel. Sinking to her knees, Cinderella hugged herself. For a moment, she let herself fantasize about a world in which she could present her glass slipper to the Grand Duke. He brought to the prince. She let herself fantasize about a world in which she could present her glass slipper to the Grand Duke, be brought to the prince, and pick up with him where they'd left off. She had thought it possible to ease away the loneliness so deep in her heart. "Maybe I never should have gone to the ball," she whispered to herself. "I was happy enough before, wasn't I? Pretending that everything was all right." She laughed sadly at how miserable that sounded. Even now she was pretending, just to get herself through what was to come. And the worst of it was that she couldn't even fight it. All she could do, all she ever been able to do, was wait. Chapter 5. The afternoon aged into evening, and the lengthening shadows looming over Cinderella's walls melted into black folds at night. In the distance, the moon rose behind the king's palace. Cinderella paced the room, her anxiety heightened by the small space. It wasn't like her to be so restless, but no matter where she looked, she couldn't avoid seeing the broken bed, the ripped sheets, and the chaos that her stepmother and stepsisters had made of her room. She couldn't avoid confronting the locked wooden door that barred her from her freedom. She tried kicking the door countless times, tried heaving her chair at it, and she'd almost had some luck picking the lock with 2 hairpins before one of them snapped in half between her fingers. But it would not budge. The window wasn't an option. She was too high up, and even if she could fashion some sort of rope, it wouldn't be long enough for her to climb down with. Only when she'd run out of all ideas and collapsed onto her chair, exhausted, did she remember. Her shimmering ball gown, the mice turned into majestic stallions, the pumpkin coach, her glass slippers. None of it would have been possible if not for one person. "Fairy godmother?" she called tentatively at first, quietly. No answer. She tried again. Fairy godmother, please help me. Maybe her fairy godmother had been a dream. Maybe all of it, the ball, the prince, the castle, had been a hopeless fantasy. Maybe when Cinderella woke up tomorrow, all would be as it had been before. But no. The prince's kiss still tingled on her lips, and the strains of the song they had danced to together still echoed in her memory. If nothing else, the shattered remains of her glass slipper strewn across the floor assured her it had all been real. Cinderella looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were bloodshot, her cheeks stained with tears. Her hairbrush and comb still rested on her vanity. Her neatly arranged hair, a bitter reminder of how happy she'd been only hours before, when she had been planning to meet the Grand Duke. What do I do? She asked her reflection. She'd grown used to talking to herself, or the mice, all these years to keep from going mad. How can I keep faith that things will get better when they only seem to get worse? She buried her face in her hands. Maybe she was right. Maybe if I had run off to the palace with the slipper, the prince wouldn't see the girl he danced with. All he'd see is an orphan in rags. She swallowed hard. A nobody. Who's a nobody? It was a familiar voice, serene and kind. Behind her, a shimmering silhouette appeared against a backdrop of shadow. Slowly, gradually, a soft light bloomed in the middle of Cinderella's room, and an elderly woman wearing a sky-blue cloak materialized. Cinderella gasped. Fairy godmother? Please, dear, call me Lenore. If the situation hadn't been so dire, Cinderella would have laughed at her matter-of-factness. You're here, she said instead. I heard you call. The fairy's round eyes widened as she gestured at the ramshackle attic. What happened? Cinderella opened her mouth to reply, but a lump formed in her throat. It hurt to speak. My stepmother. She couldn't finish her sentence. Oh, my child. Her fairy godmother opened her arms, embracing Cinderella and gently patting her back. When she pulled away, Cinderella noticed a frown had set on Lenore's face. She touched the ripped mattress and pillows, and her expression darkened when she noticed the constellation of glass shards on the ground. Your stepmother discovered that it was you at the ball. Yes, she locked me here. Oh, that woman, Lenore stomped her foot. I have a mind to... I'd best not say. It wouldn't be appropriate. Can you help me? Cinderella asked urgently. She's going to send me away. Tonight. Send you where? I don't know. Fear edged Cinderella's voice, making it tremble no matter how she tried to keep her words even. There's a man coming to take me away from Arilla's. I think he's going to sell me. Please. Her godmother clenched her jaw, and when she finally spoke, her words were heavy with sadness. I'm afraid I cannot, my child. I'd love nothing more than to turn your stepmother and stepsisters into toads and take you far from this place, but that is not how my magic works. I can only set you on the path to happiness. How does it work? Cinderella wanted to ask. She had so many questions for her fairy godmother about magic and why she'd helped Cinderella go to the ball in the first place. Questions she hadn't thought to ask the first time her fairy godmother had appeared, but there were more pressing matters at hand now. Could you unlock the door? I can certainly try. Rolling up her sleeves, the fairy godmother drew up her wand and pointed at the door. The door shuddered, but it would not open. With a frown, Lenore waved her wand and tried again, but this time the spell sent her reeling backward towards Cinderella's bed. Lenore lowered her hood. Her dark eyes filled with regret. As I say, there are limits to my powers, she explained, tapping her wand on her palm. She clutched the wand tightly, looking once more at the shattered glass. I'm sorry, dear. Perhaps I shouldn't have come to you in the first place. Why? My magic is forbidden in Arilla's, said her fairy godmother calmly. Oh, I bent the rules a little by putting a time constraint on the spell I used to send you to the ball. Rather clever of me. But my wand won't allow me to risk a spell so large again. Your magic is forbidden, repeated Cinderella, barely hearing the rest of what she said. What do you mean? There is a reason my magic could only last until midnight. It was borrowed magic. because magic in Arulas has been outlawed, and all its fairies exiled. The Grand Duke, the former, that is, he made it his mission. Oh, it happened long ago. You must not worry. Of course I'm worried. Are you in danger by being here? I should not stay long, was all Lenore would say. Her godmother cleared her throat. But there is one thing I can do at least. I can speak with your dog. Bruno? Confused, Cinderella glanced out the window. She couldn't see Bruno from here, but she imagined him downstairs in one of the storerooms, curled up against a rug and dreaming of chasing Lucifer, her stepmother's cat. By now he must be starving, she thought with a pang of guilt. Since she'd been locked up, no one would have fed him all day. Yes, that's what I'll do. I'll tell him you're in trouble, Lenora said, determined. Cinderella wasn't sure how her dog would be able to help her. How, and before I forget, continued Lenore, fishing into her sleeve, I believe these belong to you. Out came the green beads that Cinderella had worn the previous night, before Gisela had snatched them from her, restrung. I wouldn't want you to leave without your mother's beads, said Lenora firmly, clasping the emerald-colored beads around Cinderella's neck. How did you? Found them on the ground after you left last night. Your mother would have wanted you to have her beads. That horrible Gisela has had them for long enough. Keep them with you to remember where you come from. I will, said Cinderella softly. Carefully she unclasped the necklace and put it in her pocket. Thank you. Don't thank me. I wish I could have done more. The fairy placed a gentle hand on Cinderella's shoulder. Be brave, my dear. The path to happiness is not always an easy one. Now I must go. Then she vanished in a twinkle of lights, leaving Cinderella alone once more. She blinked, fighting back a fresh wave of tears. I can get through this, she whispered. I won't be afraid, she told herself. I'll find a way out, somehow. Then, trying to steady her racing heart, she waited for her stepmother's return. The sound of footsteps returned late at night, far later than Cinderella anticipated. She'd fallen asleep on her mattress, but the harsh thumps up the tower stairs jolted her awake. By the time she lit her candle, her stepmother stood at the door, looking calm and composed. I see you're awake. Good. You have a visitor. Lady Tremaine turned. Mr. Levere. A thick-necked brute of a man with a cruel leer appeared at the threshold, and Cinderella gasped. A bundle of rope dangled from Mr. Levere's hands, and his mouth bent into a pitiless smile. This is the girl, he rasped. Yes. Will she do? Mr. Levere looked her up and down. She'll fetch a fair price, more than fair. Setting his lamp on the ground, Mr. Levere reached into his pocket and handed Lady Tremaine a heavy pouch of coins. No, please, Cinderella pleaded with her stepmother. Don't do this. But Lady Tremaine ignored her and pocketed the coins. I trust you'll take her far away. Oh, I have a place in mind. It's so far Rulis isn't even on their maps. A small smile touched Lady Tremaine's mouth. She's a wicked child. Find her a household that works her to the bone. Better yet, have her thrown into the mines. She deserves nothing better. With a satisfied nod, she departed the room, leaving Cinderella alone with Mr. Levere. Cinderella cowered in a corner, her hands scrabbling behind her for something, anything to fend off Mr. Levere. Her fingers closed over her hairbrush, and she swung it wildly as he advanced towards her. Mr. Levere batted her brush aside, grabbing her arms. Cinderella struggled, lunging for the pile of glass debris on the floor, but she barely managed to grab one shard when he threw the rope around her, securing her arms to her sides and her wrists together. Let me go, Cinderella screamed. Let me! Mr. Levere clamped her mouth with his hand. Don't worry, it won't be forever. A girl like you will pay off her debts eventually. Terror seized Cinderella, and her muscles tensed with fear. What's that you've got in your hand? Mr. Levere tried to pry her hand open. A chip of glass isn't going to stop me, lass. Before he could take it from her, Cinderella threw her elbow into Mr. Levere's ribs. He staggered back, stepping into the glass slipper's remains, and let out a cry. She started to flee, spiraling down and down the stairs, but the ropes around her arms unsteadied her balance, and she didn't get very far before Mr. Levere caught up, seized her by the waist, and hoisted her over his shoulder. A good effort, lass. He pitched a pillowcase over her head, but not good enough. Cinderella struggled, trying to use the glass in her hand as a weapon, but it was no use. The bindings restricted her movement, and her feet hit the walls instead of her captor when she tried kicking. Each thump of Mr. Lavera's boots down the tower steps, then through the corridor and down into the main hall, thundered in her ears. When the front door swung open and the crisp chill of the wind bit at her cheeks through the pillowcase, she heard Bruno barking. Bruno! The bloodhound was already on his way. Scrambling towards Cinderella, he leaped to attack Mr. Lavere, but the man grabbed his driving whip from his carriage and swung it at Bruno, flinging him into a puddle. As Bruno whimpered, Mr. Lavere threw Cinderella into the carriage. "Hya!" he shouted. His whip cracked against the back of his horses, and as the wheels rattled to life, Cinderella rolled violently from side to side. The shard of glass tumbled out of her hand, and she floundered to get it back. Her fingers grazed its edge, and she bit back the pain as it nicked her palm. It was sharp, maybe sharp enough to cut her free. With renewed determination, she gripped its blunt side and started picking at the ropes. Not an easy task. Every time the carriage hit a bump, Cinderella nearly dropped the shard. Finally, when the thick twines loosened and she freed her hand, she threw the pillowcase off her head. There was nothing around her except the carriage cushions, most of them ripped as if someone before Cinderella had tried clawing her way free. The doors were bolted shut from the outside, but the window... In his haste to get away from Bruno, Mr. Lavere hadn't properly closed it. The strong winds had pummeled it open, the wooden board creaking as it swung back and forth. Rain washed into the carriage. The storm had swelled in strength, the pitter-patter now a constant drumming against the carriage roof. Mr. Lavere's horses slowed, fighting the powerful winds, and prepared to make a sharp turn. This is my chance, thought Cinderella, bolting toward the window. The carriage started again, picking up speed and throwing her back. The world rumbled beneath her, every turn of the wheels throwing her from side to side in the carriage, making it hard for her to catch her balance. She gripped the underside of the seat to steady herself. Fear made her hands shake, her knuckles bone white. Gathering her courage, she inched her way to the edge of the carriage and clutched at the open window. Rain battered her temples, and a violent gust of wind lashed at her, threatening to throw her back into the carriage. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. She meant to jump, but the horses stumbled over a broken crate on the road, and the carriage suddenly swerved right. One of the doors swung open, taking Cinderella with it and tossing her onto the road. She forgot not to scream. Thankfully, the rain muffled her cry as she slammed into the ground. She landed on her side, her legs scraping against the rough gravel. The carriage wheels splattered mud over her clothes, and she felt a shock of cold. Ignoring the pain springing in her ribs, Cinderella pulled herself up and off the street, narrowly avoiding getting trampled by another coach that came barreling past. She crawled into a corner and held her breath until Mr. Lavere's carriage rounded the corner, its wheels lumbering against the pebbled roads. Cinderella waited there, knees shaking, teeth chattering, the whole time fearing that Mr. Lavere would discover she had escaped. But when several minutes had passed and his carriage did not return, she finally stirred. One muscle at a time, she picked herself up. Everything hurt. Her ribs, her back, her hands. Cuts and scrapes nicked her knees, and her fingers were bleeding, but she was free. Suddenly, she heard a familiar whimper, and a wet, furry creature brushed against her calves. Bruno! Cinderella had never been so glad to see him. You followed me all the way from home? You brave, brave dog. She hugged him, taking comfort in his familiar face. Together they rose and wandered the neighborhood in hopes of finding a kind soul who might take pity on them. But the streets were empty, and no wonder. No sane person would be out during a rainstorm like this. The rain had snuffed the lamps, and darkness wreathed every inch of the road ahead. Each house was gated, every shop locked. There was no hope of finding help at this hour, not in this weather. The rain was relentless. They have to wait until the storm passed, or until dawn, whichever came first. They found shelter under the awning of a closed storefront. Cinderella tried knocking several times, but no one came to the door. Through the glass was a marvelous display of layered cakes, decorated with pink rosettes and candied fruits,
chocolate-laced cookies, and buttery pastries dotted with jam. "Come on, Bruno," she said, wincing as her stomach growled with hunger. She leaned against the store's brick wall and gathered her dog under the awning. "Let's sleep here tonight." She hugged him close, listening to his pulse thump steadily against her racing heart. Gradually, her temples stopped throbbing and the pain in her side dulled. "Oh, Bruno, I'm sorry." Her dog looked at her as if he didn't understand why she was apologizing to him. "You could be home with a hot meal and a warm bed right now." She stroked his ear playfully. "You could be drinking a nice warm bowl of milk or chasing Lucifer out of the kitchen." She drew him close, burying her face in his warm fur. "But I'm glad you're here, loyal as always. Thank you, Bruno." Her terror subsided, but fear lingered. New fears. Practical ones, brought on by the unyielding rumble in her stomach, the rain sinking into her skin, and the chill moving into her bones that her threadbare shirt could not prevent. What would tomorrow bring? Cinderella wondered as she shivered. She had no money, no family, no place to go. Without her glass slippers, she was sure the palace guards would turn her away at the front gates. In her rags, with the bruise on her head and scratches on her arms, who would believe that she had danced with the prince at the ball? That she was the maiden the whole kingdom was looking for. One thing was for certain: if she didn't find food and shelter, she and Bruno wouldn't last long on their own. It was what she'd always feared. Anytime she secretly fantasized about leaving her stepmother's house, this was the reality that had chased the dream away. "The world is cruel, cruel place, Cinderella," her stepmother used to tell her when she was a child. "You should be grateful to me for giving you a roof over your head. How do you think you'd fare out in the world, you, without any worldly experience, an orphan, unwanted and alone?" Those words haunted her. They were awful but true. She was alone, and she had no experience being out in the world. How would she make a life for herself? "It's better than being stuck with Mr. Levere," she reminded herself. "Anything is better than that." She glanced up, taking in the moon, still luminous even as the storm unfolded. Shielding her eyes from the rain, she craned her head north. There at the edge of the city sat the king's palace. Her father had once told her that no one could see the king's palace from any point in the city. Her view was different from the one she'd had at home, but the palace was less resplendent. How many hours had she spent staring at it, dreaming about how grand it would be to go inside, how wonderful it would be to dance within its marble halls. Well, now she had. She felt no regret about how eagerly she wanted to go to the ball. What she regretted was how naive she had been, and that flicker of longing that had sprung up inside her when she realized the Grand Duke's quest was to find her. For an instant, she fooled herself into thinking reuniting with the prince was the ticket to happiness and a better life for herself, but no longer. So where did she go from here? Despair gnawed at her. She could try to call for her fairy godmother again, but Lenore had said her magic was forbidden. Cinderella wouldn't put her fairy godmother in danger. "I'll figure this out on my own," Cinderella thought grimly. "I cannot always depend on someone to save me." "Tomorrow," she whispered aloud, stroking Bruno's head. "Beginning tomorrow, I'm never going to feel as helpless again. Once the storm ends, we make a new life, you and me." With that promise heavy in her heart, she hugged Bruno close, shifting them both deeper under the awning and away from the cold, relentless rain. It was a long time before she finally fell asleep. I'm going to stop there, you guys. We'll start with chapter 6 on the next one. I hope you guys are enjoying it so far. If you have, please put a like, do the thumbs for me just to let me know that you are enjoying it. I hope it's not too long. This is the first one. If it's too long, I'll try to shorten it. I just feel like reading it, I'm not getting very far and the time is flying. So, yeah, if you enjoyed it, please give me a thumbs up. If you would like to subscribe, that would be wonderful. I'd love to welcome you to my YouTube family, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a blessed day.